Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4. Krishna fulfills all desire. By His grace, Krishna Dhamma Prabhu and Chittamani Dham Mataji. We are reading from chapter 8. Child Dhruva goes to the forest. At the moment, let us continue. Dhruva looked down. He did not want to offend Narad, but he had no intention of going home until he had seen Narayan. Verses 30 to 31, Narad stood up and looked down at Dhruva for several moments. The Lord wanted him to help the boy. If Dhruva was to succeed in his aim, he would have to be completely steadfast in his practice. The sage needed to test his determination further. He said, I know you want to follow the mystic process of meditation that your mother mentioned. However, in my opinion, ordinary men cannot undergo the austerities required. Lord Narayan is difficult to please. I know many sages who, life after life, renounced the world and performed severe austerities and meditation, but still were unable to attain him. Verses 32 and 33, that is why I suggest you stop now and go home. When you are older and by Narayan's grace, you have been properly trained by a spiritual master, then under your Guru's guidance, you may practice mystic yoga. It is better you wait till then. In the meantime, practice feeling satisfied in all circumstances, distress or happiness. Know that in all situations we are receiving the just reactions of our past deeds by the Lord's will. If you practice tolerance, then very soon you will achieve spiritual enlightenment and become free from the cycle of birth and death. Verse 34, here is another important piece of advice for your good. Instead of envying a more qualified person, be happy to receive him. Instead of dominating a less qualified man, show him compassion. When you meet an equal, instead of competing, treat him as a friend. If you follow this advice, you will be happy even while within this material world. Verses 35 to 36. Dhruva hung his head in silence. After some moments he said, respected sage, for a person who is not troubled by material longings, your advice is excellent and will certainly lead to happiness. Unfortunately, I cannot follow it because my heart is full of desire. I know it is impudent to reject your instruction. I beg you to forgive me, for it is not my intention to disobey you. However, I cannot overcome my warrior nature. My stepmother's words have so grievously wounded my heart that I can only think of counteracting her insult. Narad said, child, instructed by Narayan, I have told you how to be happy. If that is not what you want to know, what do you want? Verses 37 to 38 now. Dhruva stood up as tall as he could. Learned Brahmin, I wanted a kingdom greater than my father's or my grandfather's or even Lord Brahma's. If you wish to help me, tell me an honest way to achieve this aim. My Lord, be merciful to me by telling me how I may fulfill my desire. I know you to be Brahma's beloved son. You travel throughout the universe playing your veena and singing the Lord's glories to spread good fortune. You are like the sun which distributes its sunshine everywhere without discrimination. Verse 39, Narad smiled. Dhruva's childish desire was understandable. He was still a young boy. What was most wonderful was his strong determination. But he would need help. Verses 40 to 41. The sage said, your mother's advice to think always think of Narayan with faith and love is your best course. Only he can fulfill your difficult request. Therefore, fully and exclusively absorb yourself in thoughts of him. Anyone with any desire should devotedly serve Narayan. There are many benefits of acting religiously, including economic prosperity, sense enjoyment, and even liberation from birth and death. To achieve any of these benedictions, one must please the Lord. Dhruva wondered again about his mother. Why had Narayan not answered her prayers? How could he get quick and certain results from his own worship? Verse 42, Narad could read Dhruva's mind. My dear boy, because I wish you all good fortune, I will tell you how you can get swift results from worshipping Lord Narayan. There is a very sacred and auspicious forest on the bank of river Yamuna called Madhuvan. This is one of the Lord's eternal residences. Go there, for just being in this sacred forest draws one nearer to him. We know that is the present day Vrindavan. That forest is in the present day Vrindavan. Verse 43, my dear boy, bathe 3 times a day in the beautiful, clear and auspicious Yamuna. Narad placed a hand on Dhruva's shoulder. Tell me, child, do you know how to perform Ashtanga Yoga? Yes, said Dhruva. My teachers taught me after my 5th birthday. Good. After taking bath in the river, sit in a quiet and calm place and practice the regulations of yoga. Narad looked down at the small boy. He would not have much experience. Verse 44, listen carefully as I go over what you must do, said the sage. Once you are seated, practice the 3 kinds of breathing exercises for controlling the life air, the mind, and the senses. Do you remember those? Dhruva said, Rechak, Purak, and Kumbhaka. Very good, said Narad. By persevering with these exercises, you will gradually purify yourself of all material contamination. Then you must meditate on Lord Narayan. Dhruva immediately sat down and began the breathing exercises. Verse 45, excellent. Now let's go over how to meditate on the Lord. His face is beautiful and he always looks pleased. Dhruva asked, is he never upset about anything? Narad laughed. When his devotees see him, he is always happy to see them and wants to offer them a benediction. Now let's get back to the meditation. Okay. Dhruva sat up straight and half closed his eyes. Narad said, meditate on his attractive eyes and eyebrows, his raised nose and broad forehead. He is more beautiful than all the gods. Verse 46, Narad entered a deep trance. Within his heart he saw Narayan and began to describe him. The Lord's form is youthful. Every limb and every part of his body is perfectly formed and free from defect. His eyes and lips are pinkish like the rising sun. He is always prepared to give shelter to the surrendered souls, and anyone fortunate to see him feels fully satisfied. He is the best refuge because he is an ocean of mercy. Verses 47 to 48. The Lord has a unique mark on his chest called Srivatsa, where the goddess of fortune resides. He is the supreme person and his bodily complexion is blackish blue. He wears a flower garland and has 4 hands in which he holds a conch, discs, club and lotus. On his head he wears a jeweled helmet. Around his neck are valuable necklaces and on his arms and wrists he wears bracelets. His neck is adorned with the Kaustubh jewel and his garments are of yellow silk. Verses 49 to 50. There is a belt of small golden bells around his waist and golden ankle bells adorn his lotus feet. All his features are delightful to the eyes and mind. He is always calm and quiet. His devotees see him standing on the whole of their lotus-like hearts, his toenails glittering like jewels. Verses 51 and 52, he smiles as he glances at his devotees. Constantly concentrate on Narad as I have described him, for he can bestow all benedictions. The mind of the devotee who meditates on the Lord's auspicious form quickly becomes free of material impurity. He experiences the highest bliss and will never deviate from the Lord again. Verse 53, now young prince, I will recite in your right ear a mantra. You must chant as you meditate. By chanting this attentively for 7 days and nights, a person planets flying. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Dhruva repeated the mantra a few times to make sure he was saying it correctly. Very good, said Narad. Now let's go over what you must do. First install a deity of the Lord, then worship him with this 12-syllable mantra. You should make offerings as sanctioned by the scripture. You can offer pure Yamuna water, garland, vegetables, fruits, and especially tulsi leaves, which the Lord greatly adores. I don't have a deity to offer these things to. Verse 56, Narad said, the Lord's form can be made from elements such as earth, water, pulp, wood, and metal. I suggest you fashion his form from a mixture of earth and water. It's important you control your senses, especially your tongue. Do not hanker for tasty food. Be satisfied with eating simple fruits and vegetables available in the forest. Do not even worry about cooking them. Just offer them to the Lord and then you can eat them. Dhruva listened attentively. In his mind, he went over everything Narad had said, going through them with the sage. Verse 57, when he and Narad were both satisfied he had understood, Narad said, as well as worshipping the deity and chanting your mantra, you must meditate on the Lord's pastimes in his different incarnations. Do you have any questions? Dhruva thought a moment and then said, what if I cannot find all the items you told me to offer? Verse 58, yes, a good question. It is important that we worship the Lord in the standard time-honored ways. However, if some of the paraphernalia is not available, you can meditate on offering it while chanting the mantra I taught you, which is not different from the Lord's form. So if you cannot physically offer something to the Lord's deity form, you can mentally offer it to his mantra form. So that is a beautiful instruction for all of us. Verse 59 to 61, be assured that if you seriously and sincerely worship Narayan as I've described, he will bestow on you whatever you want, including material prosperity, sense gratification, or liberation. One can even become the Lord's intimate associate. To achieve this, however, you must engage in devotional service constantly, 24 hours a day, with strong affection for the Lord, which means there is no attraction for sense gratification. Narad looked affectionately at Dhruva. Do you clearly understand what you must do? Yes, sir, replied Dhruva. Verse 62, then you may go to the Madhuvan with my blessings. I shall come with you to show you the way. There we will see the footprints of the original personality of Godhead, Krishna. Dhruva walked around with Narad with folded hands and offered his obeisance. Then he followed him toward Madhuvan. Verse 63, after accompanying Dhruva to Madhuvan forest, Narad's thoughts went to King Uttanpad. He was surely in great anxiety, wondering where his son had gone. Narad took his leave of Dhruva and went at once to the king's palace. Uttanpad was in his inner quarters meeting with his generals. How many men are searching for Dhruva? Sir, 1,000 men are scouring the entire kingdom and surrounding vicinity. Well, send out 5,000. No, send out my whole army. He must be found. The king paced up and down, breathing heavily. You are all useless. How is it you cannot find a small boy? Bring my horse. I will personally lead the search. The palace guard entered and bowed low. Your Majesty, Sage Narad approaches. Uttanpad dismissed the generals and hurried to the entrance to greet Narad as he walked up the palace gardens toward the entrance. Without hesitation, Uttanpad prostrated himself on the grass before Narad. He escorted the sage into the palace and seated him on his own throne. His ministers quickly brought a water basin, towel, and jug with which to wash Narad's feet. Others brought items for ritual worship of a saint, and still others brought drinks and delicacies to offer him when the greeting was complete. Uttanpad personally conducted the entire greeting with great care and attention. Then he stood with folded palms before the sage and said, I am blessed by your presence. How may I serve you? Narad smiled at the king and indicated that he should sit near him. Verse 64. My dear king, your face looks withered as if you have been anxious for a long time. What troubles you? Is there some obstruction to your religious duties? Are you disturbed by the financial problems or some other impediment to your material happiness? Verse 65. Uttanpad's chest heaved and he hung his head for a few moments. Then with reddish eyes he looked up. O great Brahmin, I am too attached to my younger wife. His voice choked with emotion and he covered his face with his hands. Then he took a deep breath and continued. I am so fallen that I behaved most callously toward my 5-year-old boy, my son and his mother. Now he has run away from home. He did not deserve such cruelty as he is a good boy. Uttanpads let out a sob. How had he been so pitiless? The child was innocent and pure-hearted. When he was an infant, he would be restless until brought into the shrine room before Narayan's deity. Then he would become captivated looking at the Lord's beautiful form. He would laugh and become excited when he heard hymns sung to the Lord. When he was able to walk, he would run to the throne room whenever he heard that a sage was speaking about Narayan. He would bow to the sages, stretching out his little arms, imitating Uttanpad and his ministers. The king wailed, he did not deserve a very harsh treatment, for he is a great devotee. Verse 66. My dear Brahmin, we cannot find him anywhere in the kingdom. I fear he may have gone to the forest. His lotus-like face must be shriveled with fear, hunger, cold, and fatigue. Why, he may even have been killed and eaten by wolves. Verse 67. Uttanpad rose and paced up and down. Tears wetted his face. Alas, just see how I was controlled by my wife. Just imagine my cruelty. Out of love and affection, the boy was trying to get up on my lap, but I did not allow him. I did not even pat him. How hard-hearted I am. Verse 68. Narad stood up and placed a comforting arm on Uttanpad's shoulders. My dear king, there is no need to worry about your son. He is well protected by Lord Narayan. Uttanpad stared at Narad. Narayan, the sage smiled. Your son's greatness is not yet known. He will soon become famous throughout the universe. The king's eyes widened. Verse 69. Yes, said Narad. Dhruva is very competent. He will perform devotional service at a very high standard, difficult even for kings and sages. In a short while he will perfect his service and return home. He will also spread your fame throughout the world. King Uttanpad laughed with relief and joy, tears flowing from his eyes. He bowed to Narad's feet and repeatedly thanked him for bringing such a good news. Verse 70. Narad raised the king and bid him farewell. Uttanpad entered his shrine room. He wanted to worship the Lord in gratitude. Others could worry about the kingdom. He prayed that Narad had been right when he said that Dhruva would soon return. Until the boy was back, Uttanpad could think of nothing else. He instructed his ministers to manage the affairs of state, and he stayed in seclusive prayer day and night, thinking of his son, rarely consulted by his ministers. The rising sun reddened the eastern sky. Maitreya and Vidur finished their simple breakfast of fruits and nuts, and after washing their hands, sat down to continue their discussions. Vidur's mind returned to the previous night's narration. He asked Maitreya what happened to Dhruva after Narad left. Verses 71 and 72. He first bathed in the Yamuna river, said Maitreya. Then he began worshipping Lord Narayan exactly as Narad had instructed. What did he eat? He ate nothing for the first day and night. Then, seeing the monkeys eating berries from nearby trees, he ate a handful of those once every third day. Even this he did simply to stay alive, for the only interest was to make progress in devotional service. Verse 73 and 74. In the second month he reduced his eating to once every 6 days, not wanting to interrupt his worship to climb trees for the berries. He ate the dry grass and leaves that lay on the ground. By third month, he was completely absorbed in the Lord's service in a deep meditative trance, and he gave up eating altogether. How did he stay alive? The body can survive by just drinking, so every 9 days he drank Yamuna water. Verses 75 to 77. By the fourth month, Dhruva mastered the yogic breathing techniques. He was able to sustain his life by just inhaling once every 12 days. He remained in a trance of worship without interruption. By the fifth month, he was standing on one leg, motionless like a column, his mind concentrated on the supersoul, his senses perfectly controlled. Verses 78 to 79. Although the entire creation rests in the Lord's body and he controls all living beings, Dhruva captured him in his heart. He thus made all the planets in the universe tremble. Just a few months previously, he had been unable to climb on his father's lap. Now that same prince, by virtue of the devotional service, rocked the earth, as an elephant rocks a boat. As he stood steadily on one leg, the pressure of his big toe made the whole earth tilt by 2.5 inches. How did that happen? Verse 80. By virtue of his bhakti, he became fully connected with the Narayan and therefore practically as heavy as a Lord. Because he closed all the apertures of his body to absorb him in devotional service, no one in the universe could breathe, not even the gods. Unable to understand what was happening, they took shelter of the Supreme Lord. Verse 81. All the gods went with Brahma to the milk ocean where Kshirodakshai Vishnu lies. Kneeling on the shore, they prayed, "My dear Lord, every living entity is suffocating. We have never seen such a thing. You are our only refuge. Since you can alone protect everyone, kindly save us from this anger." Last verse of this chapter, verse 82. Brahma received a message from Vishnu in his heart which he shared with the gods. The Lord said, "My dear gods, do not be frightened. This situation has arisen because of the severe austerity of King Utpanpad's son. He has stopped the function of all his senses and is thinking only of me. Because he has suspended his breath, the universal breathing has stopped. I shall personally go and stop him from continuing his practice. You may all return home without anxiety, as you will soon be saved from this situation." Thus ends chapter 8. Child Dhruva goes to the forest, and next time we'll start chapter 9. Dhruva returns home. So beautiful instructions and wonderful realizations also given by Naradji to Dhruva. And Dhruva has proved to everyone, to all the devotees and everyone in this world, that age is, like they say these days, age is only a number. Determination and fortitude and your will takes you to bigger heights and makes impossible looks possible, because then Supersoul, that is the Paramatma residing in our hearts, it guides us when we are determined and strongly situated in our resolute to do the devotional service, which is the supreme duty of all the living beings. And everything else, anything, whatever we are doing, we should bring Krishna in the center, and then Lord takes care of everything for us and guides us nicely. Thank you for joining. Hare Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.